What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning The Dr. Vibe Show. Also, I am CEO and president of Express Your Vibe Coaching and Communications, and I'm also the host of Epic Conversations, and this is the home of Epic Conversations. And we have another new friend on the Dr. Vibe Conversation tonight. And actually, I didn't know anything about him till I was away on a trip. I actually was on a trip doing some surfing on the internet, and I found out about this organization called ManTalks, and they were having a conference in Toronto. I live in Toronto. I'm away from Toronto, and they're having this conference. So I said, you know what? I got to get this guy on. I got to get, because, he ain't going to get away from me that easy. So we're blessed and highly favored tonight to have Connor Beaton on. He's the founder of ManTalks. He's originally from Edmonton, Alberta. He comes from an exciting and eclectic background ranging from the world of opera to technology, sales and management. He's a leader with a dynamic personality. I know that. He also has unstoppable energy and charisma, which has made ManTalks the success he is today. He's committed to developing others and giving them the tools to create top-performing teams and organizations. He has a strong vision for the future of ManTalks, and it is through his leadership that the team strives for success. And he's leading men to success, not just his team, but men to success. He's a great leader, great listener. He's always curious, fascinated by human performance, and always pushing himself and those around him to be their best. Now, a little bit, you know what? I could talk about ManTalks, but he's the man of ManTalks. So why am I talking his story? He's going to tell me his story. So welcome to the conversation tonight, Connor Beaton. What is up, man?
What is going on, man? I was just like sitting here being present to that intro was amazing. I was like, I kind of want you to write my intros from now, or at least every time that I go and speak on stage, I feel like you should introduce me. That was thank you. I'm humbled.
Let's make it. If you have another event in Toronto and you're around, I'm already nominating myself to introduce you.
Okay, I agree. This is great.
It's a done deal. Very jacked to have you on the conversation tonight. We've been going back and forth a little bit, and you're always on the go. The last time we spoke, you were in New York watching some of the U.S. Open. You didn't see some. That's good. I'm too jealous of you. But what we always like to do when we have our conversations with our friends is give us a little bit of background about yourself. We read that. We had read that great bio and all that. But where'd you grow up? Edmonton, Alberta. You're a fellow Canuck. I'm a fellow Canuck. Give us some background in the world of Edmonton.
Yeah, so I actually grew up in a small town outside Edmonton called St. Albert, and not many people know it, but it's one of kind of like the suburbs, I guess you could say. And so I grew up there. I played a lot of hockey as a kid. I grew up in a very sort of like outdoorsy family. Like I was lucky enough. I lived with my mom and my stepdad because my parents were divorced when I was pretty young, and but we had this massive yard in our backyard, and it was just like, huge trees. There was like a play area. There was the garden in the back, and I spent a lot of time outside. So that was my life in Alberta: hockey, playing outside, and kind of like rallying the troops. I had built an area out in the backwoods where it was secret. I called it my Fortress of Solitude in the honor of Superman. And I would rally the kids in the neighborhood, and we would go sneak into the Fortress of Solitude, and I dug a fire pit out in there, and we would have a blast. So that's a glimpse into my childhood, and I'm the oldest of 5.
Okay, well, I'm going to stick with the childhood for a little bit because you said your parents are divorced, and how did that affect you at a young age as a boy?
Yeah. I mean, it was a huge part of growing up, right? Because I didn't understand what was really going on, and here I was, and I found myself in this very interesting situation because my parents got divorced. They'd been married for 10 years, so they got married at 20. They got pregnant with me at 30, and 3 years later, at 33, they got divorced. And so when I started growing up, and my parents, when I was 5 or 6, they both got remarried to other people, and then a year later they both had a daughter, and then a year later they both had a son. And so I found myself in this situation where I had two kind of like identical families, right? So I had these two like identical family units, but they were polar opposite. Like each character in the sort of play was totally different. And so my dad and my stepdad were polar opposites, and my mom and my stepmom were polar opposites, and they still are, obviously. But it was a very interesting world to grow up in, because I really, from a very young age, became present to like the dichotomy that life has to present us with, and started to get present to the sort of intricacies and challenges of family dynamics. And how it affected me personally as a kid was, you know, it was challenging. I took it personally, and as a kid, I really struggled to understand why it had happened. And I was one of those really rambunctious, energetic, I still am,
Yes,
kids.
you lost it, man. So you weren't where you were from the beginning, basically, right?
Yeah. But I thought I could change things. And so I didn't understand why, you know, why I couldn't be in this ideal family situation, and why my dad had to live in a different city, and why I could only see him once a month. And so I really, when I was young, I really struggled with that. You know, I was pretty emotional about it as a kid, and I really struggled with it because I didn't understand why, you know, why we couldn't have this sort of white picket fence family. So that was one of my main struggles as a kid, was really resisting the actual dynamics of my family environment. It was a big challenge.
And I'm going to align this now with ManTalks. Where was, if there was, any male influence during those times?
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate enough that both my father and my stepfather are extraordinary men. They really, really, truly are. So my stepfather, you know, was kind of like, he's kind of like the traditional, sort of like old school, picturesque way of that most of us think of like a traditional alpha male. You know, he played the sports, he coached my hockey team. He was just like this really sort of like dominant guy, you know, very strong personality. And then my dad was the opposite of that. He was very nurturing. He was very caring and compassionate. And he was very artistic, right? And so he worked for the federal government, but at the same time, he was a classical singer as well. He sang opera outside of his job. And so I got to witness these two types of masculinity. I got to witness this sort of dominating, you know, very strong, very, you know, sometimes overly forceful and aggressive side of masculinity. And then I got to see this other side, which was very nurturing and caring and compassionate, but also very creative and very artistic and forward thinking, and a little bit of like vision, right? My dad has always had a very good vision for what life should look like. And so I had very strong influences, even as a young kid, by the two men who were very influential in my life.
Do you know how rare of a situation that is?
Yeah, it's very rare. Like I'm really lucky to have had that insight.
Because I don't, let alone young men growing up having a dad that's present, but you had a dad and a stepdad that were present. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, and I think that the sort of like juxtaposition between my two my two dads was really important, because I think so many people, they see one side, right? Maybe they have this like dominating, really aggressive father, and that's all that they see. And so they either try and avoid that like the plague, they don't want to be like their dad, or they become that exact same thing, which usually happens from avoidance. So I was really lucky that I got to kind of find this, and it took a long time, but I got to witness what what a more integrated and balanced man could look like by integrating these pieces of both of my fathers.
So you're growing up, did you go to college, university? What was that experience like?
Yeah, so I'll give you the sort of like Cole's notes of what the rest of my life looked like. But basically, I failed out of high school. I failed English and biology, not because I was stupid, but because I had so much energy and I just disliked class. I disliked the way that it worked. I thought it was stupid, and it just taught us to replicate things, and I didn't like that. And so I ended up going back and finishing my high school diploma, my degree. And I started working construction, found myself working construction in northern Alberta in the middle of winter. And it was, my first shift was in February, and it was a night. and it was a night shift. And I kid you not, it was minus 48 on my first night, and I was 18, and I was like, what the hell have I gotten myself into? And so I did construction for a while. I worked in the gravel pits in northern Alberta, and then in the summers I would do that, and then eventually I started working on the concrete crew, and I was laying sidewalks. And somewhere in there, I started to realize that this might not be what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And that happened when the construction company that I was working for offered me to go back to school to do geotechnical engineering, which is what I was kind of specializing in. And they were going to pay for half my degree. And I kind of looked into the future of my life and was like, I can't imagine that. That's just not what I want to do. And in a conversation with my dad, he said, well, why don't you go take a singing lesson? You've always loved, the arts, but you've never really pursued them. I had no background in music, no background in I had never played the piano or sang anything like that. But I had a natural talent for it. And so I went and took a few lessons and found that not only did I like it, but that I had been, I had a bit of a gift, and that people really thought that I had something. And so I started to pursue that, which led me to go to college and learn the basics of music, because I didn't know the notes on the piano. I knew nothing about music at the age of 19. And then I auditioned for University of British Columbia out here in Vancouver and University of Toronto, and both have exceptional music programs. They have the best opera programs in Canada. And I managed to get into both of them, but UBC gave me a lot of grant money. And so I came out to UBC. I did my degree. Before my degree was finished, I had a chance to travel and sing. So I sang in China, I sang in the Czech Republic, in Germany, in France, in Italy, in New York, in Toronto, and here with the Vancouver Symphony. And so I did that. Life kind of fell apart towards the end of that, which I'm sure that we'll dive into. And I found myself living out of the back of my car for a little while. And I took a year. I took a year to do nothing. Nothing but study human behavior and really learn about why we make choices, why we do the things that we do. And then at the end of the year, I set 2 goals for myself. One was to work for Apple, because I wanted to work for the biggest company in the world. I had a bit of a I guess like an itch to go and learn business and entrepreneurship. And 2 was to start my own company. And I had no idea what that looked like, either of them. I didn't know how I was going to get a job at Apple. But a month and a half later, I found myself working for Apple.
Nice.
And within a year, I'd been promoted twice, and I was overseeing the Vancouver market. I was overseeing parts of the Vancouver market for Apple. And a year and a half in, I started ManTalks off the side of my desk. And that was 2 years ago. And last year, I left Apple to run ManTalks full time. And by the end of this year, will be ManTalks, the event, and the mastermind will be in 11 cities around North America. So it's it's been I'm leaving pieces. I've condensed it. I'm leaving pieces out.
Don't worry, you're coming back for another visit. Don't worry, we're not gonna get you away. We're being easy on you the first time around, brother. Let me and we'll get into the ManTalks now, because this is what we want to be the focus of our conversation. I always like to ask innovators this conversation piece. Do you remember the moment you said, I want to do this thing called ManTalks? And it probably wasn't called ManTalks when you first thought about it, but do you remember that moment when you said, I got to do this because I'm working at Apple, big company in the world. Why the turn?
So ManTalks, I knew I wanted to do it. ManTalks actually happened before I even worked for Apple. Not the name, not the idea, but the spark got ignited within me long before that. So it was actually after my life kind of fell apart, I started having conversations with a lot of the guys in my life who I considered close friends and sharing with them what had been going on behind the scenes. And what I started to find was that a lot of the guys that I spoke with, it looked like they had this really great life on paper, right? Like it looked like they had this really great life, and behind the scenes, they were struggling. And when I started to open up and be vulnerable and tell them about the shit that had happened in my life, ooh, can I swear on here? Is that?
Go ahead. It's your show. I'm just driving the ship. Go on, man. It's part of the story.
So, when I started to talk about the actual, the real stuff about what had been happening in my life, it gave permission to them to open up and be vulnerable as well and to meet me there. And I started finding out that a lot of them had been struggling financially, they'd been using drugs, that kind of stuff, and things that I didn't know about. And these were men in my life that I considered to be my close friends. And it hit home, and I'll never forget this, because I was riding the bus with my best friend, and I'm telling him some of the stuff that had been going on, and it's late. We had just gone for a beer, and we're going back. We're just like going back to his place to have another beer, and I'm telling him exactly what had been going on behind the scenes, and I said, this is what happened, and I lived in my car for a few weeks, and I was too proud to tell you. And he kind of his head kind of like slouched down, and I could see that he was starting to cry, and I was like, what's going on? And he said, I just want to thank you for being honest with me. And he said, you've opened the door for me to tell you that I tried to commit suicide last month. He said, I tried to hang myself, and I've really been struggling with depression, and I didn't know. And I kind of sat back in my seat and was just like, how did we get here? How did we get to the point where you are one of my closest friends in the world, and I had no idea what was going on in your life, and you had no idea what was going on in mine? And in that moment, I realized that this wasn't just like a me and him problem. This was a problem for a lot of guys where they didn't have real connections. They had these surface level BS friendships where they talked about booze, babes, and blood sports, right? And that's all. And they didn't really talk about the meaningful things that were going on in their life. And so that was the trigger that planted the seed for what would become ManTalks, 3 years later.
What was it like the day you left Apple to pursue this full time?
And
on top of that, how much ping ponging did you do in your head, if any, before you left?
So I had built a pretty specific runway for myself. I knew what I wanted ManTalks. ManTalks is a social enterprise. So there's a nonprofit arm of it, which is all the events, and then there's a for-profit arm, which is the mastermind groups. And I had a very specific sort of goal in mind that I wanted to have saved personally from my salary, and I had a very specific goal in terms of where ManTalks was going to be at. And there was only ping-ponging because I made really good money at Apple. I had a 6-figure salary, I had benefits, I had bonus, like I had the whole thing, and I had a great career ahead of me. And the only ping-ponging that happened was, am I really going to leave the #1 company in the world to go and try and run my own business for men? And I had set some goals for myself and said, if I can achieve these goals by the end of the year, I'll know that I'm ready to go. And I had hit all those goals by October, and so I gave my notice immediately. As soon as I had hit those targets, I gave my notice. And the day that I left was really bittersweet. I loved the people that I worked with. I loved the company. I still do. And I took a photo outside one of the locations that I was at, and I went home and I sat down, and it was December 5th last year, and I sat down and I posted it on Facebook, and I just broke down and I just started crying because I felt so grateful to have had that opportunity and to have worked with those people. So it was humbling, for sure, humbling.
A day you'll never forget.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
There are so many men that are in that same sort of situation where they want to jump, and I'm sure that your story is providing some encouragement, enlightenment, because when you're leaving the biggest company in the world to start something on your own for men, that's big. Any regrets yet?
No, none whatsoever. What I wanted to touch on there, to your point, is one of the personal development sayings that I hear all the time, or like the quotes that I hear that I absolutely freaking hate. And for the listeners out there, like maybe somebody loves this saying. You know what? I'm not even going to apologize. Leap and the net will appear. I freaking hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. It's stupid. Do not leap. You'll fall on your freaking face. Build the net. Build the net. If you build a net to catch you and you still try and take off, great. That's absolutely fantastic. But don't think that some net is going to magically appear without you doing some work beforehand. I think it's just garbage. And I see so many people try and branch out with no plan, with no anything, and they fall on their face and there's no net there, and then they wonder what the hell happened after. And it's heartbreaking. And build yourself a runway. Build your plane, build your runway, take that baby off and fly. That's what I have to say.
No problem. You're going to say everything you want in the next few minutes. So it's all good. It's all good. When you made that move to leave Apple and start ManTalks, were there any critics?
You know, it's interesting because people were pretty supportive of me. There was a couple of people that I worked with who were, you know, invested in my career, that definitely they wanted me to stay because they, you know, I was the successor for some people and they had plans for me within the organization. And so they weren't necessarily critiquing my choice. It was just more a sense of disappointment that I wasn't going to be there. And I think the only people that were critical were the ones who were jealous and envious, and the people who really had been talking for years and years about doing what I had done and had never taken action. And, you know, I didn't take it personally because it's just a reflection of themselves and their lack of taking action, their lack of building what they want in the world. And I just wished them well and offered my support more than anything else. I said, if there's any way that I can help you, you let me know and I will drop everything I'm doing to do that.
You know, and there's a lesson learned from what Connor said, that many of us have ideas to start things. We're not the only person in the world thinking of that idea. And it's always, it takes that one person and you'll say, oh, I could have done that. Well, you didn't. You didn't. And you're not the only game in town if you want to start something. If you're going to start it, you got to make it happen because someone's going to beat you.
Yeah.
You know, and I can tell by the man that Connor is, he don't play. When he goes for something, he makes it happen. And it's funny because this weekend I was attending some events for the Toronto International Film Festival. And I had a great conversation, interview with a gentleman who works for Will Smith and Jada Pinkett. And I asked him, like, is there any lesson you've learned from Will? And he said, well, I'll give you one. Will has an attitude when he's after something, he'll tell the person, it's you and me on the treadmill against each other. Either one or two things are going to happen. I'm going to win or I'm going to die.
It's very true.
So I just wanted to drop that little story in because I can tell by the conversations that I've had with Connor and what he just shared there. He's either a win or die person. Like if anyone leaves Apple, he's a win or die person, right? So
Can I tell you a quick story on that? It's kind of a funny story. It's really short. So when I was a kid, that backyard that I used to play in all the time, it had these massive, like 120-foot trees. Like they're huge. And one year, my parents decided that for my birthday they were going to give me a hatchet, and so they gave me this hatchet, this little axe. And the summer rolled around, and we had a lot of shrubs and stuff in the backyard. And my parents said, we need your help. And I said, okay. And they said, we want you to help us cut down some trees. Can you go out in the backyard and cut down some of the trees and help clear out an area so that, you know, we can use the backyard a little bit more? And I said, okay, sure. And so I'm like 10, 11 years old. And so I go outside and I have my hatchet with me, and I'm walking around in the backyard looking for what tree I want to cut down. And I look over and I look at the biggest tree, and I've tried to climb this tree before. And I think, I'm going to cut you down. And I walk over to the biggest tree in the backyard and I start hacking away. And for like an hour, I'm out there unsupervised hacking away at this freaking tree. And I take this big chunk out of the side of this tree. And my mom comes outside after I've been doing this for like an hour. And she sees what I'm doing, and she's livid, right? She's like, "What are you doing? Like, what the hell are you doing trying to cut down this big tree?" And then she's, I'm standing there like, "Well, you told me to help you cut down trees." And she just breaks out laughing, and all she says is, "This is so you, to be challenged and decide to take on the biggest problem. Don't ever change. And that always stuck with me, because it was a moment where I feel like she could have really scolded me and told me to play small, but decided to encourage me to take on big problems. And that's just stuck with me forever.
Excellent. Well, let's get to the early days of ManTalk. What were those days like?
Yeah, so we, just to give people a context of what ManTalks actually is, we got featured in CBC, and we've been featured on CNN and the National Post now, and people usually say the same thing. They say ManTalks is like TED Talks meets Oprah, but for guys. And and so that should give you a bit of a context. It's a speaker series event, and what we do is we find incredible men in the community who are willing to share their autobiography. And something that I really fundamentally believe is that we as men especially, we learn through storytelling. And storytelling has really kind of gone by the wayside. So, a lot of young boys, a lot of men have grown up without the traditional storytelling that we would have learned and taken in information and taken in values and beliefs that we used to 100 years ago. And so what we want to do is bring that back, because when you think about the lessons that you've learned from people, you've learned it through stories, whether it's hearing the story of how Steve Jobs started Apple, or how Elon Musk started Tesla, or Bill Gates, or whoever it is. It doesn't matter if it's in technology and business, or it's in spirituality or health and wellness. It doesn't matter the category. We learn by hearing about their journey. And so we find exceptional men in the community who are willing to share their stories. So the very beginning was interesting, because first off, I want to start a website, and it was going to be a resource for men to go and tell their stories. And when I started looking at the logistics of that, I was like, I don't know a thing about websites. I don't know anything about websites or online marketing or hosting. Like, what is this? I don't know this. And so I started polling some of my friends, and we started talking about it. And my partner at the time, her and I were having a conversation, and she said, "Well, you've been on the stage before. You know all about being in front of people. Why don't you just put on an event?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've been thinking about that, but then I would have to tell my story." And she was like, "No, well, yeah, maybe you shouldn't do that then." And I was like, "No, yeah, I should do that." And so I started working on putting on the first event, and it was funny to hear and see people's reaction when I first started telling them, like, "Oh, I'm going to have this event. It's going to be called ManTalks, and it's going to be like, personal growth and personal development for guys, and we're going to have, kick-ass guys come in and tell their personal story." And at first, people were like, "Oh, that actually sounds kind of interesting," and I could see how that's relevant and how that's needed. And, some people had very visceral reactions to it, where it's like, "Yes, that has to happen. And I know who you need to talk to, and I'm going to help you." And other people, had the opposite reaction, where it's just like, "Well, men have everything already. And why do men need this? And it sounds ridiculous." And, but the first event, kicked off. We had 43 people there. And it was in an ING Direct in downtown Vancouver. It was in a financial institution, which is now Tangerine. And the event went really well. But what was more surprising was I was just planning on having one event and just kind of seeing how it went. And we donated all the money to charity. But the outreach after the event was exceptional, and we had men reaching out saying, I had the best conversation with my wife. And I called my dad. The one guy wrote me an email the next day, and thanked me, because he went home and phoned his dad, and he hadn't talked to his dad in 8 years. And I sat there touched and humbled and obviously emotional, because I didn't expect these conversations to have that sort of impact on people. I really didn't. I wasn't too sure.
Okay, what were you expecting then? If you didn't expect that, what were you expecting for that first event?
I think I was just expecting people to come and be a part of a conversation. And the impact that I wasn't expecting was the fact that people were going to take these out and take action in the world. And so I guess my intention was just to create like a different narrative and to break down some of the stereotypes that men face, and for have men to shift their perspective. That's what my initial intention was. But then when I saw that the sort of like physical, real world impact, I was like, right, that's actually what I was going for, but I didn't even know it. Like that's what I want. That's the impact that I want, but wasn't really conscious of it. I just wanted to shift people's perspective and leave them feeling good, kind of like this motivational rah-rah.
Yeah.
But what happened was so much deeper than that, and that was the surprise.
In the early days of ManTalks, was it easy or difficult to get a team?
Oh, yeah, Jay has a good point, so I wanted to say in the comment there.
Jay's a regular, and he's an outstanding guy. And Jay, if you want to come in on the conversation, you're always welcome, and I'd love you to come in and provide any insight. But yeah, go ahead, Connor.
Yeah, so sorry, what was the question in the early days of ManTalks?
In the early days of ManTalks, was it easy to assemble a team? Because you can't do it all by yourself. And many men think they can do it by yourself, but I know that you are smart enough to realize that you couldn't do this all alone.
Yeah. I mean, I still struggle with that sometimes, to be completely candid.
Sure.
And I don't think that'll ever go away. Like, really, the really strong men that I know, I think it's a battle for them always to find this balance between being a lone wolf and being a pack leader. And, in the very beginning, it really was a struggle because I found myself wanting to do everything. After the first event, I was like, okay, this is great. And now I need to manage everything. I need to find the venue. I need to find the speakers. I need to coach them and train them. I need to market it. I need to sell out the event. I need to do the graphics. I need to come up with the logo and like all of this stuff. And when I started looking at it, I started realizing, well, A, I don't know if I can do all that. And B, I don't know how to do the majority of this. And the interesting thing is that because after the event, people were so moved by it that they started reaching out and asking, how can I support? What do you need help with? And I was lucky to have learned some key lessons about leadership because that's what I did. I ran sales and operations teams for Apple. I was fortunate enough to really learn some key things about that. And so one of the things that I hope everybody takes away from this is that whether you're running your own business, I'm going to give away like one of my secrets that's really led to some great success in this area. But one of the ways in which you can grow your business or your personal brand exponentially is when people come to you and they say, "How can I help you?" Most people will say, "I don't know," or they'll just give them a task. I see this 90% of the time. They'll say, "Oh, you know what you could help me with? You could help me with marketing because you're an ad agency, or you can help me with sales. You can build me a funnel." The problem with that is that might not be what that person wants to do. And what I started doing from a very early place was simply saying, "I don't know. How do you want to help?" And it created this really unique space where all of a sudden people were like, "Well, oh, you mean you're going to ask me what I want to do? Well, I want to help you build the website, or I want to help you fill the room, or I want to help you find sponsors." And I was like, "Great, I have no idea how to do that. So why don't we do that?" So if there's one thing that I could leave people with in this area, it's definitely to say, "I don't know, how do you want to help?" Because you open the door for people to be of service, and that is more powerful than delegating something to them by far. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, when I'm at events and when I connect with someone, I say, "How can I help you?"
Mm.
And a lot of and people say, they look at you, and I'm saying it right from the heart, and I say, it may not be today, it may be a week, it may be 2 years down the line, but remember, how can I help you? And that's led to some of the greatest opportunities for both of us and the bigger audience, because when people talk about win-win, and this is something I want to share with men, when you're looking at win-win, it's not just between you and the other person. There's also the audience that has to benefit also.
That's right.
So yeah. I fully understand where you're coming from. And men, sometimes you got to humble yourself.
Yeah. And the cool thing is that you'll bring in, you'll bring in people who will have a skill set that you just don't have, and they'll do it way better than you. And you're not going to waste your time. And I learned this at Apple because, I brought a very artistic viewpoint to things in terms of team development, and so I could speak to culture very well. But there were people. I like to say that my music degree gave me a bachelor's in business because I learned about being the brand and what it takes to be successful. And then Apple gave me my MBA. And I say that because the people that I worked with at Apple, they went to Stanford and had MBAs from Stanford and Harvard and Yale and IE in Madrid, which is the #1 MBA program in the world. And so I really got to see like critical thinking. And, that's a very, very unique gift. And so when you open yourself up to learn from the people around you, and you don't need to have all the answers, and you don't need to be the be-all, end-all, it's a treat because people get to finally contribute to you. And to Jay's point, it empowers them.
Yeah. Man, and I just piggyback back on what Connor's saying. Sometimes, man, it's a good thing to hire people that are smarter than you in some areas.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's and Connor's a great testimony on I am too. When I don't know something, I humbly say, I don't know it. You're smarter than me. Make it happen for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have, here in Vancouver, I have sort of like 2 guys that support really intensely, that are invested in the company. And, one of them works for the biggest marketing agencies in the world. Wow. And the other one is a professional ghostwriter who's written New York Times bestselling books. Nice. and Amazon bestselling books. And they both bring a skill set to the table that I just don't have. And without them, we wouldn't be as far. And the guy in Toronto knows sponsorship, and it's just incredible. Like ManTalks would not be, we're going to be in, like I said, 11 cities by the end of the year. That wouldn't be happening if it was just me. It just simply would not, period, full stop.
How do you decide, and what sort of logistics does it take from the ManTalks team to set up a new city? Because Vancouver is home, and I know you're in other cities. What does it take logistics-wise to set up ManTalks in another city? Because I want other people to hear this, because if they're looking to do it in another city, Connor's would give you maybe some of the background on what it does take to set up in another city, or set up one of their branches in another city.
Yeah, I mean, we try and, because ManTalks is a nonprofit, like it's not like, it's not some like multi-million-dollar event company. So just so there's no illusion there. We have the foundation that is building a scholarship for men, and that's where the funds go from all the events internationally. But what it takes is, I think I'll summarize this right at the gates by using an African proverb, which has really shaped a lot of my life, and that's, if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together. And for me, that's how we've done everything, is community. And so some of the logistical aspects of how we've built this is, we've built the sort of like the drier stuff. Like we've built the resources that will outline and show people exactly how to put it on. But some of the keys are finding really influential people within their communities. And, so the guy in Chicago, for example, has partnered with the University of Chicago. He's got the University of Chicago on board to host our ManTalks. And, he's connected with some incredible people there, and they believe in the cause of what we're doing. And so, outside of the resources that we're building so that people can put it on, it's really connection. What we really look for is people who are gifted in connecting with people. We always try and put on zero cost events so that, we have sponsors that give us, that donate an event space, chairs, AV equipment, stuff like that. And that creates a win-win situation for everybody, because you start to build some really great connections in your community that you otherwise wouldn't have. And because it's a cause that seems to be like, I like to say that we're like on the front of this wave that's just starting to come out. A lot of people want to get behind it, and they want to get on board. So from a logistics standpoint, it's like finding exceptional people, bringing exceptional people together. We have all of the resources. we have all the resources. Like we've built the resources. So some of the logistics are just like finding space, finding speakers, and connecting with local media to see who wants to cover it, and then putting it out in their communities.
There you go. Like myself, I heard about your organization, I reached out and I said, what can I do? And I say the easiest thing at first, get you on to spread the message globally. Fantastic. Well, you know what? I was going to get into a part of the conversation about different aspects of manhood. We don't got enough time, so you got to come back because I want you to expand on some areas of manhood. So I've actually have an idea that I'm going to take offline with you, but we'll save it for offline. But one of the things that you have made very important in this conversation, especially in the last few minutes, is the connections. One area of manhood I want you to speak to is the importance of relationships. Because,
relationships between men, or
well, a man's relationship in himself and also man's relationship with each other. Because from what you just shared, ManTalks wouldn't be where it is without these relationships you have with not only men in your hub in Vancouver, but Toronto, Chicago. That takes investment.
Yeah.
So maybe the rest of the time we have on this conversation, we can discuss about the importance of relationships and manhood.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so let's start with self first, because it starts there. I think a lot of, not to generalize, but there's a lot of men out there who haven't taken the time to actually face themselves and get to know themselves. And that's no fault of their own. That's been the environment that they've grown up in. That's been the lack of initiation that's, not present in our society. There's so many factors that play into that. But I think one of the biggest things that we can do as men is to start tuning in to our desires, to what drives us, to what we think and feel is meaningful, to, healing our emotional scars and wounds and understanding what they are and why they're there. And when we can start to do that, we can start to show up in the world in a very, very different way. Like a lot of people try and teach confidence by using these tricks of standing up straight and opening your body up and all that other kind of stuff. Not that there isn't merit in that, but if you want real confidence, know who you are. Know what you like, know what you want in life, know what you stand for, know what principles guide you, know what values are important to you. And that will create confidence. That in itself will create more confidence than any of these other tricks that you'll learn at some, socializing conference. So in terms of getting to know yourself, I think there are some incredible books that people could check out. I think that journaling and writing is one of the most powerful tools that men can use in order to dive into not just their thoughts, because as men we live here, we live in our mind and in our brain. And one of the things that most men need to work on and need to do in order to connect at a deeper level is to start to understand what their heart and their soul wants. And while that might sound, spiritually frou-frou to some people, it really is about getting out of our head and getting it into our bodies. And writing is a huge conduit for that. So starting to write down and ask yourself questions of, what do I want in my life? Who do I want to be as a man? Who do I want to even emulate? Who do you look up to? And to start asking whether or not those are the types of men that you want to look up to. So I would say that that's a big piece, forms of silence, starting to tune into your inner critic and some of the things that you say about yourself is really important. And then in terms of building relationships with men, I mean, this is some of the most important work. Just a few points on this before, and I know I'm kind of I hope I'm not rambling at all, but
not rambling at all. You're giving valuable stuff, so just your heart, man.
So here's some unknown things. I get asked all the time in interviews, are men in decline? And the answer is yes, men are in decline. And the reason why men are in decline is for many reasons, but mostly because of social isolation. And what a lot of people don't know is that 50% of men in North America, in the UK, and in Australia, 50% of men can't identify a best friend. And these are men over the age of 19. So what does that mean? Maybe some people think that that's not really relevant or important. Imagine that you're 19 or 20 and you lose your parents or you're 44 and you get divorced and you have no friends anymore, and your wife takes, half of your net worth, and you're left broke, living out of an apartment, paying child support, trying to make ends meet, and you have nobody to talk with because your parents have passed away and you're alone. It saddens me because most men overvalue the relationships to the women in their life and undervalue the relationships of the men in their life. And so how do we get back to this place where we realize how fulfilling and how meaningful relationships between men can be? I think that one of the biggest things is understanding that the value that interaction between men can have. And I think one of the biggest challenges that men face is the distinction between challenge and competition. There are so many men who treat their relationships with their other guy friends as competition, and they do it inadvertently. They do, and I want to preface it with there's nothing wrong with competition. There's nothing wrong with competition, but there is a problem when all the time you are competing and dick measuring with the other men in your life, because it never creates the space for you to have a real conversation, for you to have a real connection, and it never creates a space for you to be really seen or heard, and that is really unfortunate. So how do we build these connections? Well, we break outside of the bounds of talking strictly about booze, babes, and blood sports, and we get into building what I call building your brotherhood. And this is something that I'm actually writing a book on right now, is how to rebuild your brotherhood. And it's one of the most important things that we can do, because it leaves the other people in our lives feeling supported, leaves us feeling supported. And one of the ways that we can do it is by asking questions that we might be uncomfortable with. And a simple example of that is you could ask one of your buddies, like, what's one thing that you're struggling with right now in your life? Like, what's going on that I don't know about, or what's one thing that not many people know about that's going on in your life right now? And just asking something simple as that, it's not invasive, it's not obtrusive, can open the door. And it also starts with you. If you can create the space to be honest and vulnerable with another guy in your life, as maybe uncomfortable as that might feel at the very beginning, it will create permission. And it will create a space for him to say, you know what, a story that's happening to you, and this has been going on for me, and I haven't said anything, and I don't know why, but I feel like I can tell you this right now. And not every guy's going to be able to open up. It's going to be confronted for some men, but for the right ones, for the right friends, it will create the space for them to really step into it. So those are the pieces. Start asking questions of your friends that you wouldn't normally ask your guy friends, and be open, be real with them, be raw. Bring some vulnerability in the conversation, because it will give them the permission to show up for you.
And again, I piggyback on what you're sharing, because that's one of the reasons I started this journey many years ago. And one of the components was to provide a place where men could feel comfortable to express themselves. And I didn't expect every man to jump on board. Yeah. But what I expect was some men to jump on board and speak to those men who were nervous or didn't want to jump on board, saying, you know what, you're not alone. And one of my mentors, and if Jay's still on here, is Glenn Barker from the Mankind Project in Chicago. And I remember one of the things he always said, that most people learn things by duplication. Very rarely someone steps and does something totally different. They do it by duplication. And he also said something very early in my learning from him. He said that we replicate what we emulate.
Absolutely.
And those things have never stopped in my mind. Some of the teaching, the conversations that he's shared on the platform here. And I so much agree that. And another thing I ask a lot of men who I think are ready to handle this, how's your heart? And I don't mean the physical heart.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of men will look at me like, yeah, I work out 3-4 times. I said, I'm not talking about that heart. Men are very easy to talk about that heart or share about that heart. And as you said keywords: vulnerability, providing a safe environment. I know that's what your organization is doing, and taking it to another level. And I'm sure that the results keep on growing in a positive direction.
Yeah, and I just want to add one thing for the ladies that are out there listening, which is, so first and foremost, our events aren't just exclusive for men. Our events are open to men and women, and usually 40 to 50% of our audience are women. And for me, women are an absolutely crucial and integral part to the development that needs to happen from our side of the fence. Social isolation is up amongst men. Suicide rates amongst men is up 60% in the last 45 years. And what most people don't know is that 3/4 of suicides worldwide are men. 3/4. It's 600,000 guys every year out of the 800,000 that take their lives. And if we really want to curb this, I could go on with all the stats, right? Like 65% of abuse is done by men, whether it's sexual or spousal or whatever the case may be. And if we really want to start curbing this, we have to get men involved in conversation. And for a lot of men, and this is where I bring it back to the women, for a lot of men, women are the permission holders. They are the ones holding the card that says you can go and do this work, whether it's their sister, whether it's their mother, whether it's their wife or their girlfriend or the woman at work, doesn't matter. Because most guys wouldn't feel comfortable hearing that from another guy unless they really knew them. But for many reasons, women are the permission holders. Yeah. And so I hope, and my intention with ManTalks is that it's an invitation for women to come and be a part of our conversation, see the development that we're doing, witness the sort of evolution, and to give men permission to show up and do this work. So that's what I wanted to invite into the conversation.
I can relate, because on the majority of conversations that I have, at least 1/3 to half the audience are women, and they jump in and talk because they say, we want to know what's going on with the men. We want to know what's going on. They're not there to bash it. They want to know because they know how important it is to have strong men in society. And I piggyback with you in regards to the suicide stuff. Whenever I tell people, especially in North America, after 40 years old, 40 to 50% of the suicides are committed by men. A lot of men are quitting. They've given up. And it's so unfortunate. They don't have a friend to latch on to. They feel that they're going all alone. They're tired and they just check out. It's crazy.
Yep, 100%, man. 100%. It's unfortunate.
Let me ask some wonderful success stories along the way, some special moments you've had during the journey since you started ManTalk. Anything you want to highlight to our audience, some special moments that you've had?
There's so many.
I know. Pick one or two. That's all right.
From a personal standpoint, it led to me doing a TED Talk, which was really cool. And that was a humbling experience, to touch that many lives. And it got shared on UN Women. It got shared through He for She, the Good Man Project. CBC picked it up. So it's been shared quite a bit. It's called The Mask of Masculinity. From just to see this conversation expanding the way that it is to so many cities and having so many people interested and involved is humbling unto itself. But I think more so what really lands for me or really resonates for me is some of the success stories that we've seen within men in the communities who are part of our mastermind groups here in Vancouver and in Toronto. Who do I want to choose? There was a guy that moved there's actually 3 men that have moved from different cities to Vancouver to be a part of this community. So one moved from Edmonton. Yeah. One moved from Whistler, one moved from LA, and one moved from Edmonton. And that was humbling because they saw what we were up to. They wanted to be a part of it. They were, one guy was here for the very first event, and he said, you know what, I'm going to move here to be a part of this and help support it. And he helped it grow. And because of that, he really grew. Like his business started to take off. His relationship started to take off. Like everything in his life really started to expand. And it's just been humbling to see how people's lives have really shifted. Guys have started families. Other guys have started businesses that have just taken off in the last couple of years. And so I guess those are like the success stories, is just seeing the impact that it's had on men's lives.
Nice. How did it feel, I guess, first of all, being asked to do the TED Talk, and how did it feel during and after the TED Talk?
I mean, they kind of scouted me, actually. Like, they came to a few ManTalks events and heard me speak, and then they approached me after and said, "We want you to apply. We think that you have a good message." And so that was humbling, because most people, they at that time they already had 400 applicants, and so that was humbling to have that honor to be asked to apply. And after I did apply and I got accepted, it was a long road. It was a 6-month process, and there was many iterations.
Yes, I know. I actually know a couple that did a TED Talk, and that's even a more rare event. But they told me it's not just, oh, you're approved and you get going. No, it's a journey.
Yeah. Yeah, so, that was good. And then right before the TED Talk, I was nervous, man. Like, I had run the talk like a few hundred times. I had to sing in it. I hadn't sang in like 4.5 years. So I was nervous. There's 2,000 people in the audience. So knowing that I'm going to step out on stage in front of 2,000 people, I was nervous about that.
Hold on, man. You're a performer. What do you mean? Why are you nervous? Come on, man.
Everybody gets nervous. If
I
people tell you that they don't get nervous, they're full of it. Yeah, so that was great. And then after the talk itself, it was a relief for it to be done. But also it was incredible to experience the outpouring of people who were reaching out to me. People that wanted to just say thank you. I had a guy reach out to me who, again, was in a bad place emotionally and physically and mentally, and he reached out to me and he said, "Thank you. Your talk saved my life." And I was in a really bad place when I came across it, and I read it, and it helped shift my perspective of the fact that I'm not failing as a man. And so after that, it was just really interesting to have people reach out and just experience gratitude, and to just like really receive people's thanks. And so that was cool.
Man, how do you keep it up? How can you keep on going? All these people wanting your time. You can't be everywhere, man.
Yeah, I'm starting to have to say no to some interviews and say no to certain things, and I've had to really dial in on what I do with my time, because we have our own podcast and where we interview like New York Times bestsellers and all that kind of stuff. And so, and I'm starting to do the podcast circuit while I write the book. So it's, I don't know, assistant. I need an assistant, maybe. I think that's probably next.
There you go. Oh, man. Yeah, that'll be an interview process.
Yeah.
That'll be an interview process. Well, I know that our time is probably wound down, and your dad's with you, and I don't like stealing time away with you and your dad. So before we let you go, do you have any final words you'd like to share with the audience? And also, what is the future vision of ManTalks?
Yeah, I mean, I would, there's so much. I would just say, challenge your perception of what you think it means to fulfill your role as a guy, and what you think that is, and really ask yourself the question of where am I happy because I think I need to I think I need to be in this stereotype of being a man. And because for so many guys, I see them stopping themselves from being creatively expressive and doing some art form, or starting a business or starting a family, or admitting that they're in love, because it challenges what they think it means to be a successful man. And so I would say just start to really be present to that, and be present to where you're not doing something because you think that it means that if you did it, that it would mean that you're less manly. And really challenge that, really sit with that. And then secondly, I would leave with a story. And I put this in my TED Talk. It's not really a story, but I saw this photo, and it was a wolf pack. And there's 3 wolves at the front, and then there's 5 wolves, and there's a whole bunch of wolves, and there's 1 wolf at the very back. And at the very front of the pack are these 3 old wolves, and so the older ones lead the pace, and they're there to kind of set the pace, and then behind them are the 4 or 5 omega wolves, and those are kind of like the second in command, right? Those are like they're the warriors, they're the fighters, they're the ones that are there to protect the pack. And then behind them is the rest of the pack of wolves, and then at the very back was the alpha wolf leading from behind. And I think what I want to leave people with, and what I feel really resonates with me about this, is that our perception of what it means to be a man is that we're a lone wolf. But in nature, the lone wolf is actually a danger to the rest of the pack and is an outcast and is not allowed to be a part of it. So the lone wolf isn't actually healthy. The lone wolf is dangerous. The lone wolf is in nature a castaway. And a really integrated alpha male is the pack leader, is the one that's a really important part of the community and of the society. And that's what I would love to leave people with is to challenge what it means to be a man, challenge what it means to be an alpha, just challenge it and look to nature because it has all the answers.
Wow. Well, there he is, folks. I don't know when I'm going to get a chance to get him on air again because he's between running ManTalks, doing the podcast, writing a book. He's got him and his organization, and I know he knows I mean this. Him and his organization are making a lot of positive things happen, not only for just men, but society in general. And we're very excited. First of all, very thankful, and don't take it for granted that you shared some time with us because I know you're always on the go. You're always welcome back to the conversation piece. I have some ideas that I want to put your way. Offline.
Yeah.
I'll say them live, but there's a lot of thoughts I have. And best love to your dad.
Thank you. Thanks.
Really and truly, that means a lot to me that your dad's with you and we're doing this conversation together. I think that's just really massive.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Well, I put down I guess some of the contact information for ManTalks on the side, the website address, the Twitter handle, Facebook page. I'll even put Connor's Twitter handle. You can follow. You could have just follow him on Twitter. Just follow him. Don't think about it. Just do it.
Yeah, or follow me on Facebook because that's where most of my stuff goes. You can follow me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram. Wherever, whatever your favorite form of social media is, just add me up. Don't be afraid to reach out. And if you reach out through the contact page on mantalks.com, that goes right to me. There
you go. Well, that's what I did. I reached out on the contact page, and I said, the guy in charge is responding to me? I'm impressed. Very good. It's Dr. Vibe here. I'm the host of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. Hey, thank you, Fancy Dogs, for subscribing to the channel. I have an idea about Fire Talk and ManTalks, but we're going to keep that quiet. But host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, president and CEO of Express Your Vibe Coaching Communications. I am the host of Epic Conversations and produce Epic Conversations. As always, I like to say you're blessed and highly favored, a magnet for miracles and a solution for someone's problem. God bless. Peace, well, keep the faith. Connor, have a great evening, and thanks again, and looking forward to chatting with you soon.
Thanks for having me.